Maria Santos wiped down table 12 for the third time that evening, her tired eyes scanning the empty coffee cup and crumpled napkins left behind. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she reached under the booth cushion to check for forgotten items, a routine she'd perfected after 5 years of waitressing. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and expensive, leather that felt foreign against her calloused hands. She pulled out a wallet, thick with cash and cards, more money visible than she'd seen in months. For just a moment, Maria's breath caught as she calculated how many bills this could pay, how many nights she wouldn't have to choose between groceries and her daughter's school supplies. But then she heard Sofia's voice in her head, asking why someone would keep something that wasn't theirs, and Maria knew exactly what she had to do. She didn't know that returning this wallet would lead to a knock on her door 3 weeks later, or that the stranger standing there would hand her an envelope that would change everything. She didn't know that her simple act of honesty was about to transform not just her life, but prove that kindness creates ripples far beyond what we can imagine. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The late afternoon sun streamed through the grease-stained windows of Mickey's diner, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Maria Santos moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her sneakers squeaking softly against the floor as she balanced plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. At 32, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to find strength in struggle, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that had seen better days. The silver nameplate pinned to her uniform read Maria in faded letters, and beneath it a small pin shaped like a butterfly that her 8-year-old daughter Sofia had given her for Mother's Day. The diner buzzed with its usual mix of truckers, local workers, and the occasional businessman who had wandered off the interstate looking for something more authentic than fast food. Maria had worked the evening shift for 5 years now, ever since Sofia started school, and she could no longer juggle the morning hours with getting her daughter ready. The pay wasn't much, barely enough to cover their small apartment and keep food on the table. But it was honest work, and Mickey was understanding when Sofia got sick or had school events. As she refilled coffee cups and took orders, Maria's mind wandered to the stack of bills waiting on her kitchen counter. The mortgage payment was due in 3 days, and she was short again. The little house she'd bought with her ex-husband before he left was more than she could afford on her own, but it was Sofia's home, the only stability her daughter had known. The thought of losing it kept Maria awake most nights, calculating and recalculating numbers that never seemed to add up right. "More coffee, honey?" she asked a businessman in an expensive suit who was pecking at his phone while picking up a slice of apple pie. He barely looked up, just nodded and continued typing. Maria noticed his briefcase leaning against the booth, polished leather that probably cost more than she made in a month. Some people lived in such different worlds, she thought, but everyone needed coffee and a decent meal. The evening crowd was lighter than usual, and Maria found herself with rare moments between customers to catch her breath. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. 7:30. Sofia would be finishing her homework about now, probably curled up on the couch with her math workbook and the small reading lamp they bought at a garage sale. Her babysitter, Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, would make sure she had dinner and got to bed on time, but Maria always felt a pang of guilt for missing these evening hours with her daughter. "Order up," Mickey called from the kitchen, his gravelly voice cutting through the ambient noise of conversations and clinking silverware. Maria hurried to collect the plates, 2 hamburger specials and a bowl of soup for the couple in booth 7. As she approached their table, she overheard them discussing vacation plans, something about a cruise to the Caribbean. The casual way they talked about spending thousands of dollars on leisure made Maria's chest tighten slightly, not with resentment, but with a kind of wistful longing for a life where money wasn't a constant source of anxiety. By 9 o'clock, the diner had mostly emptied except for a few regulars nursing coffee and a young couple sharing a piece of chocolate cake. Maria began her closing routine, wiping down tables and stacking chairs. When she reached booth 12, where the businessman had been sitting, she noticed he'd left a decent tip, $5 on a $12 check. It wasn't generous by some standards, but Maria had learned to appreciate any extra money, and she tucked it into her apron pocket with a small smile. She was collecting the dishes when her hand brushed against something wedged between the booth cushions. At first she thought it might be a phone, but as she worked it free, she realized it was a wallet. Not just any wallet, but one made of buttery, soft leather that felt substantial in her hands. The kind of wallet that spoke of quality and expense, with metal corners that caught the diner's lights. Maria's heart began to beat faster as she held the wallet. She glanced around quickly, but the businessman was long gone, probably miles down the interstate by now. Her fingers trembled slightly as she considered her options. She could look inside, find some identification, maybe contact the owner. Or she could slip it into her apron and deal with it later, when her shift ended and she could think more clearly. The rational part of her mind whispered that this was an opportunity, a gift from fate. Who would know if she just kept it? The owner had left it behind, hadn't been careful enough to check the booth before leaving. And Maria, dear God, Maria needed money so desperately. The mortgage payment loomed like a storm cloud, and Sofia needed new shoes. Had been wearing ones that were too small for 2 months now because Maria kept putting off the expense. But even as these thoughts flashed through her mind, Maria knew she couldn't keep the wallet. It wasn't hers. Someone was probably panicking right now, checking pockets and retracing steps, worried about credit cards and identification and whatever else was inside. She thought about Sofia, about the values she was trying to instill in her daughter, about the importance of doing the right thing even when it was hard. With steady hands, Maria opened the wallet to look for identification. What she saw made her gasp softly. The billfold section was thick with cash, more money than she'd seen in one place in years. Hundreds and fifties, neatly arranged, easily several $1,000s. Her hands shook as she flipped past the money to find a driver's license. The photo showed the businessman from earlier, but his name was Jonathan Pierce, and his address was in an upscale part of the city, in a neighborhood Maria had driven through once but never stopped in. The kind of place where houses had circular driveways and gardens maintained by professional landscapers. There were credit cards, too, platinum and black cards from banks that probably didn't even have branches in her part of town. Maria sank into the booth, the wallet heavy in her hands. She could pay her mortgage, buy Sofia new clothes, maybe even get the car fixed so it would stop making that grinding noise when she turned corners. All of her immediate problems could disappear with what was in this wallet. But the weight of it felt like more than leather and cash. It felt like a test of character that would define who she was and who she wanted her daughter to become. She closed the wallet and pulled out her phone, looking up the number for the local police station. If she turned it in there, they could contact the owner and return it properly. But as she started to dial, she hesitated. What if it got lost in the system? What if some officer decided to help himself to the cash? The cynical part of her, formed by years of disappointment and struggle, worried that doing the right thing through official channels might not guarantee the right outcome. Instead, she decided to call the number on one of the business cards in the wallet. Jonathan Pierce, the card read, followed by a company name she didn't recognize and a phone number with the local area code. It was after business hours, but maybe she could leave a message, let him know his wallet was safe. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. You've reached Jonathan Pierce. Please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. His voice was professional, confident, the voice of someone accustomed to having his calls returned promptly. Mr. Pierce, Maria said after the beep, her voice soft but clear. My name is Maria Santos. I'm a waitress at Mickey's Diner on Route 9, and I found your wallet in one of our booths tonight. Everything appears to be there. You can reach me at this number, or you can come by the diner tomorrow. I'll be working the evening shift starting at 4. I hope you get this message soon." She hung up and stared at the wallet for a long moment. Then she wrapped it in a clean dish towel and locked it in Mickey's office safe, making a note for him about what she'd found. Mickey had been in business for 30 years and was as honest as they came. He'd make sure the wallet stayed secure until its owner could claim it. The drive home took Maria through the part of town where she'd grown up, past the community center where she'd played basketball in high school and the church where she'd been married. It was a neighborhood in transition, some houses well-maintained with tidy gardens, others showing the wear of economic hardship. Her own small house sat on a corner lot, with a front porch that needed painting and a mailbox that tilted slightly to the left. Sofia was already asleep when Maria got home. Her homework spread across the kitchen table, and a note from Mrs. Rodriguez saying she'd had dinner and finished her math problems. Maria looked in on her daughter, tucking the blanket more securely around her small form and brushing a strand of dark hair away from her face. In sleep, Sofia looked even younger than her 8 years, her cheeks still rounded with childhood and her breathing deep and peaceful. Standing in her daughter's doorway, Maria felt the full weight of her decision. She could have solved all their problems tonight, could have ensured that Sofia never had to worry about having enough food or warm clothes or a roof over her head. But she also knew that keeping the wallet would have changed something fundamental between them, would have introduced a secret that would eat away at the honesty she'd tried to build into their relationship. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, looking at the bills that needed to be paid. The mortgage statement sat on top, the amount due highlighted in yellow. She had most of it, had been saving carefully for weeks, but she was still $200 short. Maybe she could pick up an extra shift, or sell some of the furniture she'd been meaning to get rid of. There had to be a way to make it work without compromising her integrity. The next morning came too soon, announced by Sofia's alarm clock and the familiar routine of getting ready for school. Maria made breakfast while Sofia got dressed. Scrambled eggs and toast that they ate together while discussing the day ahead. Sofia had a spelling test and was nervous about the word necessary, which she kept wanting to spell with an extra C. "Remember what we practiced," Maria said, braiding her daughter's hair with practiced fingers. "NECEs, SARY. Think about needing 1 C and 2's letters." "What if I forget?" Sofia asked, her dark eyes serious with the gravity that 8-year-olds brought to such important matters. "Then you do your best. And remember that trying hard is more important than being perfect," Maria replied, the same thing her own mother had told her years ago. "I'm proud of you for studying so hard." After dropping Sofia at school, Maria drove to her second job at the grocery store, where she worked part-time stocking shelves and helping with inventory. It wasn't glamorous work, but every hour helped. And the manager was flexible about her schedule around the diner. She spent the morning pricing items and organizing displays, her mind occasionally drifting to the walnuts locked in Mickey's safe. By mid-afternoon, she was back at the diner, tying on her apron and checking the section assignments. Mickey had left a note saying that someone had called about a lost wallet, and that the man would be coming by around 5:30. Maria felt a flutter of nerves, wondering what Jonathan Pierce would be like in person, whether he'd be grateful or suspicious, whether he'd even believe she'd found all that cash and hadn't touched it. The dinner rush started early. A busload of senior citizens on their way to a casino filling half the dining room with cheerful chatter and orders for soup and sandwiches. Maria moved between tables with automatic efficiency, part of her attention on her customers and part watching the door for a man in an expensive suit. He arrived at exactly 5:30, looking around the diner with the slightly confused expression of someone who rarely found himself in such places. He was younger than Maria had expected, maybe late 30s, with graying hair at his temples and the kind of confident posture that came from never having to worry about money. When he approached her, His expression was a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Are you Maria?" he asked, his voice the same one she'd heard on the voicemail. "I'm Jonathan Pierce. I believe you found my wallet." "Yes, I did," Maria replied, untying her apron. "Mickey, I'm taking my break," she called to the kitchen, then gestured for Jonathan to follow her to a quiet booth in the back corner. "Your wallet is safe. Everything should be there just as you left it." She retrieved the wallet from the office safe and handed it to him across the table. Jonathan opened it immediately, his eyes widening slightly as he took inventory of the contents. He counted the cash quickly, his fingers flipping through credit cards and checking the various compartments. "This is remarkable," he said finally, looking up at Maria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "There's over $3,000 here, plus credit cards, my business documents, everything." "You didn't take anything?" The question hit Maria like a small slap, though she knew it was reasonable for him to ask. "No, I didn't take anything," she said quietly. "It's not mine." Jonathan studied her for a long moment, as if trying to understand something that didn't quite make sense to him. "I have to ask, and please don't take offense, but why?" "I mean, clearly you work hard for your money. This is a nice place, but it's not exactly high-end dining. You could have taken some cash, and I never would have known exactly how much was in there." Maria felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a kind of indignation she tried to keep in check. "Because it would have been stealing," she said simply. "And because I have a daughter who's watching how I live my life. I want her to know that being honest matters more than being comfortable." Something shifted in Jonathan's expression, a softening around his eyes that made him look more human and less like the successful businessman she'd expected. "I'm sorry," he said. That was a thoughtless question. "It's just that in my world, people don't often do the right thing when no one's watching. You've restored my faith in human nature." He reached into the wallet and pulled out several $100 bills. "Please, let me give you a reward. This is the least I can do." Maria shook her head immediately. "I don't want a reward. I did what anyone should do." "But not everyone would do it," Jonathan insisted. "Please, I insist. You've saved me enormous hassle, not to mention the money. I had important documents in here, cards that would have been difficult to replace. You've gone out of your way to help a stranger." "No reward," Maria said firmly, standing up from the booth. "I need to get back to work." "I'm glad you got your wallet back." Jonathan stood as well, but he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he looked around the diner with new eyes, taking in the worn booths and the hardworking staff, the simple food and honest atmosphere. "This is a good place," he said. "The food was better than I expected when I stopped here yesterday." "Mickey's been running this place for 30 years, Maria said, pride evident in her voice. "He takes care of his employees and serves good food at fair prices. We get a lot of regular customers who've been coming here for years." "I can see why," Jonathan replied. He hesitated for a moment, then extended his hand. "Thank you, Maria. Really, what you did today means more than you might realize." Maria shook his hand, noting the softness of his palm compared to her own work-hardened skin. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Pierce. And maybe check your booth next time before you leave." He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "I will definitely do that. Good night, Maria." After he left, Maria went back to work, but she found it hard to concentrate on taking orders and refilling coffee cups. There had been something in Jonathan Pierce's eyes, a recognition of something he hadn't expected to find in a roadside diner. She wondered about his life, about the kind of business that let him carry around $3,000 in cash, about whether he had a family waiting for him in that upscale neighborhood. The rest of the evening passed quietly, and Maria was able to leave a few minutes early. She drove home through streets that seemed more familiar and comforting than usual, past the grocery store where she worked mornings, and the school where Sofia was learning to spell necessary and navigate the complex social world of third grade. Sofia was waiting for her with news about the spelling test, which she'd passed with only one mistake, confusing receive and receive. They celebrated with ice cream while watching a nature documentary about penguins. Sofia curled against Maria's side on their old couch, both of them laughing at the antics of the penguin chicks. "Mom," Sofia said during a commercial break, "Mrs. Rodriguez said you found someone's wallet at work today." "I did," Maria confirmed, stroking her daughter's hair. "It had a lot of money in it, and I made sure it got back to the person who lost it." "That was nice of you," Sofia said with the matter-of-fact tone children used when discussing obvious truths. "Did they say thank you?" "They did, and they wanted to give me a reward, but I told them no." Sofia considered this for a moment, her 8-year-old mind processing the implications. Because it would be like getting paid for being good? Maria smiled at her daughter's insight. "Exactly. Being honest is just the right thing to do, not something you do to get rewarded. Like how you don't get paid for loving me," Sofia said, snuggling closer. "You just do it because I'm your daughter." "That's right, baby. Some things are too important for money." That night, after Sofia was asleep, Maria sat at her kitchen table again with a stack of bills. She'd managed to pick up an extra shift at the grocery store for the weekend, which would give her almost enough to make the mortgage payment. Almost, but not quite. She'd have to call the bank in the morning and ask for a few more days, hope that they'd be understanding about her situation. She was so absorbed in her calculations that she almost didn't hear the soft knock at her front door. It was nearly 10 o'clock, late for visitors in her neighborhood. Through the peephole, she saw a woman she didn't recognize, well-dressed but not threateningly so, holding what appeared to be an envelope. "Who is it?" Maria called softly, not wanting to wake Sofia. "My name is Rebecca Pierce," the woman replied. "I'm Jonathan Pierce's wife. I know it's late, but I was hoping to speak with you for just a moment." Maria hesitated, then opened the door with the chain still attached. Through the narrow gap, she could see a woman about her own age with kind eyes and an expensive handbag clutched in her hands. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," Rebecca said. "Jonathan told me what you did today, returning his wallet with all that money inside. I couldn't sleep without coming to thank you personally." Maria unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. "That's very kind of you, but it really wasn't necessary. Your husband already thanked me." "May I come in for just a minute?" Rebecca asked. "I promise I won't keep you long." Against her better judgment about letting strangers into her home, Maria stepped aside and let Rebecca enter. The woman looked around the small living room with the same expression her husband had worn in the diner, as if she were seeing something unexpected and trying to understand it. "You have a beautiful home," Rebecca said, and Maria could tell she meant it despite the mismatched furniture and the walls that needed fresh paint. "Thank you. Can I offer you some coffee or tea?" "No, thank you. I won't stay long." Rebecca sat on the edge of the couch, still clutching her handbag. "Jonathan told me you refused a reward, and I have to admit, I didn't believe him at first. In our world, everyone has an angle, everyone wants something. But he was quite insistent that you genuinely didn't want anything in return." Maria took a seat in the armchair across from her, folding her hands in her lap. "I just did what was right. I don't understand why that's so surprising to people." Rebecca smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Because most people wouldn't have done what you did. And because—" She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "Because Jonathan and I have been blessed with more money than we know what to do with, and we've forgotten what it's like to meet someone who isn't impressed by that." She opened her handbag and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is why I couldn't sleep tonight. Jonathan did some research after he left the diner. He's very good at finding information about people when he wants to. He learned that you're a single mother, that you work 2 jobs, that you're struggling to keep your house." Maria's spine stiffened. "He had no right to investigate me." "You're absolutely right, and I told him the same thing. But he did it because he was trying to understand you, trying to figure out what kind of person returns $3,000 when they clearly need money themselves." Rebecca leaned forward. "He found out about your mortgage situation." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Her private struggles, laid bare to strangers who lived in a different world. "I don't know what you think this conversation is going to accomplish, but I'd like you to leave now. Please," Rebecca said quickly. "Just let me explain. We don't have children, Jonathan and I. We've tried for years, spent more money than I care to think about on treatments and specialists. But it hasn't happened for us. And sometimes I think that's made us forget what really matters, what it means to sacrifice for someone you love." She held out the envelope. "This isn't charity, and it's not a reward. It's a thank you from 2 people who forgot that kindness still exists in the world, but there are still people who do the right thing simply because it's right." Maria stared at the envelope but didn't reach for it. "What's in there?" "Enough to pay off your mortgage," Rebecca said quietly. "Completely. And maybe a little extra to make sure Sofia has what she needs." The words seemed to echo in the small room. Maria felt as if the air had become too thick to breathe, as if the world had tilted sideways. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because I didn't do anything to earn it. I just returned a wallet." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You did something that restored our faith in people. You reminded us that integrity isn't for sale, that some people still choose to do right even when it costs them. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Maria's own eyes began to blur. "You don't understand. I wanted to keep it. When I first found that wallet, I wanted to keep it so badly. I sat there and calculated exactly how it would solve all my problems. But you didn't keep it," Rebecca said gently. "That's what matters. You chose to do the right thing even though it was hard, even though it would have been easy to rationalize keeping it. That's not common, Maria. That's extraordinary." The envelope sat between them like a bridge neither woman was sure how to cross. Maria thought about Sofia sleeping in the next room, about the mortgage payment due in 2 days, about the grinding sound the car made and the shoes that were too small and the 1,000 small ways that poverty wore away. Dignity. "I have a daughter," Maria said finally. "If I take this, what does that teach her? That being honest pays off in the end? That's not how the world works." "Maybe it teaches her that sometimes good things happen to good people," Rebecca replied. "Maybe it teaches her that kindness creates ripples we can't always see, that doing right might not pay off immediately, but it connects us to each other in ways we don't expect." Rebecca stood up and placed the envelope on the coffee table. "I'm not going to force this on you, but I'm not taking it back either. Jonathan and I have more money than we'll ever spend, and we've never found a better use for it than this. If you won't accept it as a reward, then accept it as a gift from people who are reminded of something important by your actions." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Your daughter is lucky to have you as a mother. The world is lucky to have people like you in it." After Rebecca left, Maria sat staring at the envelope for a long time. She thought about opening it, about counting the money inside, but somehow that felt like accepting it before she'd decided whether she could. Instead, she made another cup of tea and sat at her kitchen table, the envelope within reach, but untouched. She thought about Sofia, about the lessons she was trying to teach through her actions rather than her words. If she accepted this money, what would that say about the value of doing right? But if she refused it, was she letting pride override practical needs, sacrificing her daughter's security for the sake of principle? The questions chased each other through her mind until exhaustion finally overtook her and she fell asleep at the table, her head pillowed on her arms, the envelope still unopened beside her. She woke to Sofia gently shaking her shoulder. "Mom, you fell asleep at the table again." Maria stretched, her neck stiff from the awkward position. Morning light was streaming through the kitchen windows, and she could hear the sounds of the neighborhood waking up, dogs barking and car doors slamming as people left for work. "I was just thinking about some things," Maria said, quickly moving the envelope to a drawer where Sofia wouldn't see it. "Important things?" Sofia asked, the kind of question that suggested she'd sensed the undercurrents of adult worry that children always seem to pick up on. "Maybe," Maria replied. "But nothing you need to worry about. Go get ready for school." The morning routine proceeded normally. Breakfast and backpack checks and the drive to school with Sofia chattering about a field trip to the science museum that was coming up next month. Maria kissed her daughter goodbye and promised to help her study for the math test that was scheduled for Friday, then sat in the car for several minutes after Sofia had disappeared into the school building. She drove to work at the grocery store, where she spent the morning unloading a delivery truck and pricing canned goods. The physical work helped clear her mind, and by lunchtime she'd made her decision. She would open the envelope, see exactly what Rebecca Pierce had offered, and then decide whether accepting it was something she could live with. But when she got home that afternoon, the envelope was gone. Maria searched the kitchen frantically, checking drawers and countertops, wondering if she'd misremembered where she'd put it. Had she dreamed the whole encounter with Rebecca Pierce? Had exhaustion and stress finally driven her to hallucinations? Then she heard Sofia's key in the front door, home from the after-school program she attended 3 days a week. "Mom?" she called. "There's a man at the door who wants to talk to you." Maria's heart sank. Had Jonathan Pierce changed his mind about her honesty? Had he decided she must have taken something after all and come to confront her? But the man standing on her front porch wasn't Jonathan Pierce. He was older, wearing a suit that had seen better days, and he held a clipboard and an envelope that looked official. "Ms. Santos? I'm David Chen from First National Bank. I have some papers here that require your signature." Maria's blood turned cold. The mortgage payment. They were foreclosing already, even though she was only 2 days late. "Mr. Chen, I can explain about the payment. I have most of it, and I'll have the rest by Friday. Please, just give me a few more days." David Chen looked confused. I'm sorry, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here about a late payment. I'm here because your mortgage has been paid in full. Someone made a payment yesterday for the entire remaining balance." The words seemed to come from very far away. Maria gripped the door frame to steady herself. "That's not possible." "I have the paperwork right here," David said, offering her the clipboard. "The payment was made by cashier's check, and it cleared this morning. Your house is now owned free and clear. I just need your signature to acknowledge receipt of the satisfaction of mortgage documents." Maria's hands shook as she took the clipboard. The numbers swam before her eyes, but she could make out the essential facts. Her mortgage balance had been $127,000. Someone had paid $127,000 to First National Bank on her behalf. The house was hers. "Who made the payment?" she managed to ask. David consulted his paperwork. "The check was drawn on an account belonging to Pierce Holdings, LLC. Does that name mean anything to you?" Maria sank into the porch chair Sofia used for reading on sunny afternoons. Pierce Holdings. Jonathan and Rebecca Pierce. They hadn't just left an envelope full of cash. They'd gone directly to her mortgage company and paid off her entire loan. "Mom?" Sofia appeared beside her, looking worried. "Are you okay? You look funny." "I'm fine, baby," Maria said. though she felt anything but fine. She felt as if the world had rearranged itself while she wasn't looking, as if the rules she'd learned about how life worked had suddenly changed. She signed the papers with a hand that barely felt connected to her body, accepted copies of the documents that proved her house was now hers completely, and watched David Chen drive away in his practical sedan. Then she sat on her front porch with Sofia beside her, trying to process what had just happened. "Mom, why did that man say someone paid for our house?" Sofia asked. Maria looked at her daughter, at the innocent curiosity in her dark eyes, and tried to find words that would make sense of this extraordinary turn of events. "Remember the wallet I found at work? The people who owned it, they wanted to do something nice for us. They bought our house?" Sofia's voice was full of wonder. "They paid off the money we owed on our house," Maria clarified. "So now it really belongs to us, and we don't have to worry about losing it." Sofia considered this with the seriousness she brought to important matters. "That was really nice of them." "Yes, it was. Are you happy, Mom?" The question caught Maria off guard. Was she happy? She was overwhelmed, certainly. Grateful beyond words. But also confused and a little frightened by the magnitude of what had been given to her. How did you process a gift that changed everything? "I think so," she said finally. "It's a lot to understand all at once." That evening, after Sofia was in bed, Maria called the number on Jonathan Pierce's business card. He answered on the second ring, as if he'd been waiting for her call. "Mr. Pierce, it's Maria Santos. I need to talk to you." "I was hoping you'd call," he said. "I imagine you have questions." "I have a lot more than questions. I want to know why you did this." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Can we meet somewhere to talk? This isn't really a conversation for the phone." They arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where Maria could speak her mind without worrying about Sofia overhearing. Jonathan was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee, one of which he pushed toward her as she sat down. "Before you say anything," he began, "I want you to know that what Rebecca and I did, we did it because we wanted to, not because we felt obligated. You had no right," Maria said, surprised by the anger in her own voice. "You had no right to investigate my life, to find out about my private business, to make decisions about what I need." "You're absolutely right," Jonathan said quietly. "And I'm sorry about that, but I'm not sorry about paying off your mortgage." "Why?" The question came out more like a plea than a demand. "I returned your wallet. That's what anyone decent would do. It doesn't deserve this kind of response." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Do you know what I do for a living, Maria?" The business card said something about investments. "I buy companies that are struggling and try to turn them around. Sometimes that works out well for everyone involved. Sometimes it means laying off workers and selling assets and basically dismantling people's livelihoods. In the name of efficiency." He took a sip of his coffee, and Maria could see the weight of those decisions in his expression. "Over the years, I've become pretty cynical about human nature. I've seen people do terrible things for much less money than what was in my wallet. I've had employees steal from me. Business partners try to cheat me. Contractors inflate their bills because they think I won't notice or care." He looked directly at her. "When you returned that wallet with all the money still inside, when you refused even a small reward, it reminded me that there are still people in the world who can't be bought. People who do the right thing because it's right, not because it benefits them." "So, this is some kind of social experiment?" Maria asked, her anger flaring again. "No," Jonathan said firmly. "This is gratitude, and maybe a little bit of penance for forgetting that money isn't the most important thing in the world." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of a young boy, maybe 10 years old, with a bright smile in Jonathan's eyes. "This is my nephew, Cameron. His parents died in a car accident 2 years ago, and he's been living with Rebecca and me. We're trying to adopt him, but it's been complicated because we're not his blood relatives." Maria looked at the photo, seeing the family resemblance and something else. A sadness around the boy's eyes that spoke of loss too profound for his young age. "Cameron's been having a hard time adjusting," Jonathan continued. "He's angry a lot, acts out at school, doesn't trust easily. The social workers keep asking us about our ability to provide stability, emotional support, not just financial security. And honestly, I wasn't sure we could. We'd gotten so focused on business success that we'd lost touch with what really matters." He put the phone away and met Maria's eyes again. "When you returned that wallet, when you showed that kind of integrity without expecting anything in return, it reminded me of the kind of person I want to be for Cameron, the kind of person I want him to become." Maria felt her anger beginning to dissolve, replaced by understanding. "So, paying off." "Partly. And partly it was about Rebecca and me remembering what it feels like to do something purely good, without calculating the return on investment or wondering what the tax implications might be." Jonathan smiled ruefully. "We've been wealthy for so long that we'd forgotten money is supposed to be a tool for helping people, not just accumulating more money." "But why so much?" Maria asked. "Why not just help with a few payments, or buy Sofia some school clothes? Why change my entire life?" Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "Because we could. Because we have more money than we'll ever need, and you have integrity that we'd forgotten existed. Because sometimes the universe puts people in each other's paths for reasons we don't fully understand until later." He leaned forward. "Maria, I want to tell you something. And I hope you'll understand that I'm not trying to manipulate you or make you feel obligated. Cameron has been asking about you since Rebecca told him what happened. He wants to meet the woman who found Daddy." Jonathan's wallet and gave it back. "He calls you Daddy Jonathan?" "It's new. Started about a month ago. I think he's beginning to trust that we're not going anywhere." Jonathan's voice was soft with emotion. "He said he wants to meet someone who's honest like his real dad was. His father was a teacher, made very little money but was the most ethical person I've ever known. Cameron remembers that about him." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. "What are you asking me?" "Nothing," Jonathan said quickly. "I'm not asking you for anything. I just wanted you to know that what you did, it had ripples you couldn't have imagined. You reminded us of who we want to be, and that's helping us become the kind of parents Cameron needs." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Maria spoke. "I don't know how to accept this gracefully. I've never had anyone give me something so big, so life-changing. I don't know what it means or what I'm supposed to do with it." "You don't have to do anything with it except enjoy the security it provides," Jonathan said. "Use it to spend more time with Sofia, to worry less about bills and more about being her mom. Maybe take that night class you've been thinking about, or start that small business you mentioned to Rebecca." Maria looked at him in surprise. "I never mentioned a small business to Rebecca." Jonathan had the grace to look embarrassed. "That might have come up in the background check I shouldn't have done. Something about wanting to open a catering business someday?" Despite everything, Maria found herself smiling. "You really did investigate me thoroughly. I'm sorry about that. It's a habit from business, but it was wrong in this situation. The catering thing was just a dream. I like to cook, and I'm good at it. But dreams and reality are different things. Maybe they don't have to be," Jonathan said. "Maybe sometimes reality can be better than dreams. if we're open to possibilities we hadn't considered. Maria thought about Sofia, about the field trip to the science museum that she could now afford without worrying about the cost, about the car repairs she could finally get done, about the college fund she could start, about the small business that might not be impossible after all. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Do you really think I'm extraordinary for returning your wallet? Or are you just so used to being around dishonest people that basic decency seems remarkable?" Jonathan considered this seriously. "Maybe a little of both. But I think you're underestimating how rare it is for someone to do the right thing when it costs them something significant. Most people would have rationalized keeping at least some of the money. Most people would have convinced themselves they deserved it." "I thought about it," Maria admitted. "I'm not a saint. That's exactly what makes it extraordinary. Saints don't struggle with temptation. Regular people do, and regular people who choose to do right anyway, they're the ones who give the rest of us hope." Maria finished her coffee and stood up. "I should get home to Sofia. But Jonathan, I want you to know something. I'm grateful." "More grateful than I know how to express. But this doesn't change who I am or how I'll live my life. I'm still going to work hard, still going to teach Sofia that integrity matters more than comfort." "I wouldn't expect anything else," Jonathan said, standing as well. "That's why you deserved this gift." As Maria drove home through streets that looked somehow different now, more full of possibility, she thought about the strange journey that had led from finding a wallet to having her mortgage paid off by strangers who had become something like friends. It seemed like the plot of a movie, too neat and convenient to be real life. But it was real, and she was going to have to figure out how to live with the knowledge that sometimes, very rarely, doing the right thing did pay off in ways beyond imagining. Sofia was waiting for her with homework spread across the kitchen table and questions about fractions that needed patient explanation. As they worked through math problems together, Maria felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. The mortgage payment wasn't looming over them anymore. The stack of bills was still there, but now it felt manageable rather than overwhelming. "Mom," Sofia said, looking up from her worksheet, "are we rich now?" The question made Maria pause. Were they rich? They had a house they owned outright, which was more than many people could say. They had security, at least for now. But they certainly weren't wealthy in the way the Pierces were wealthy. "We're richer than we were yesterday," Maria said carefully. "But more importantly, we're safe. We don't have to worry about losing our house anymore." "That's good," Sofia said with satisfaction, turning back to her fractions. "I like our house." "I like it too, baby." That night, after Sofia was asleep, Maria called her mother in Arizona to share the incredible news. Her mother listened in stunned silence as Maria explained about the wallet and the Pierces and the mortgage payment. "Mija," her mother said when Maria finished, "are you sure these people don't want something from you? This sounds too good to be true." "I thought the same thing, Mom. But I think they're just good people who have more money than they know what to do with. And they wanted to help. Your father always said that doing right would pay off eventually," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "I just never thought it would pay off this much." They talked for another hour, Maria's mother asking dozens of questions about the Pierces and their motivations, her protective instincts on high alert despite the obvious good fortune. Finally, she seemed satisfied that her daughter wasn't being taken advantage of. "I'm proud of you, Maria," she said before they hung up. "You did what I raised you to do. And look how it turned out. Maybe there's still justice in the world after all." The next few weeks settled into a new normal. Maria continued working both jobs, partly from habit and partly because she wasn't quite ready to believe that her financial situation had changed permanently. She paid off her credit cards and put money into savings, luxuries that had been impossible before. She bought Sofia new shoes and a winter coat and signed her up for the art classes she'd been wanting to take. But the biggest change was internal. The constant low-level anxiety about money that had been Maria's companion for years began to fade. She slept better, smiled more, found herself able to be fully present with Sofia instead of mentally calculating bills while they played together. 3 weeks after her mortgage was paid off, Maria got a call from Rebecca Pierce.
"I hope you don't mind me reaching out," Rebecca said, "but Cameron has been asking about you constantly. Would you be willing to meet him? Maybe we could all have dinner together, somewhere casual where the kids would be."
Comfortable? Maria hesitated. She'd begun to feel like the Pierce family's gratitude project, and she wasn't sure she wanted that dynamic to continue. But something in Rebecca's voice suggested this was about more than obligation. Is this about Cameron needing to meet someone honest, or is this about you all feeling like you need to stay in touch with me because of what you did? Maria asked directly. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Honestly? A little of both. But mostly it's because Cameron is fascinated by the idea of someone who found treasure and gave it back. He's created this elaborate story about you in his head. And Jonathan and I think it might help him to meet you and see that you're a real person, not a fairy tale character. What kind of elaborate story? He thinks you're some kind of superhero. He drew a picture of you with a cape, standing in front of your diner with a wallet in your hand and a big smile on your face. He calls you the honest lady and has been asking when he can meet you. Despite herself, Maria smiled. A superhero, huh? A 10-year-old's version of a superhero. Someone who does the right thing even when it's hard. Which, when you think about it, isn't a bad definition. Maria found herself agreeing to dinner the following Saturday at a family restaurant that had a playground for the kids.
Sofia was excited about meeting new people, especially a boy who was closer to her age than most of the adults in their lives.
The restaurant was crowded and loud, exactly the kind of place where a conversation could be casual and unforced. Cameron Pierce turned out to be smaller than Maria had expected, with serious eyes and his uncle's careful way of observing before speaking. He shook Maria's hand with old-fashioned politeness when they were introduced, but she could see him studying her, comparing her to whatever image he'd built in his mind. Sofia, never shy about making new friends, immediately engaged him in a discussion about the playground equipment and whether the slide was fast enough to be fun. Within minutes, they were racing across the restaurant toward the play area, leaving the adults to follow at a more sedate pace. "He's been nervous about meeting you all week," Rebecca confided as they found a table with a clear view of the playground. "I think he was worried you might not be as nice as he'd imagined." "And what does he think now?" Maria asked, watching Cameron and Sofia navigate the climbing structure together. "I think he's relieved that you're real," Jonathan said. "And that you have a daughter he can relate to. He's been lonely, even with us. Other kids his age don't understand what he's been through." They ordered pizza and watched the children play, the conversation flowing more easily than Maria had expected.
Cameron and Sofia returned to the table breathless and hungry, and Maria found herself enjoying the boy's quiet sense of humor and the way he looked out for Sofia on the playground equipment.
"Are you really the lady who found Uncle Jonathan's wallet?" Cameron asked her directly during a lull in conversation.
"I am,"
Maria confirmed.
"Did your uncle tell you about that? He said you found lots of money and gave it all back, even though you needed money yourself."
Cameron's eyes were serious as he studied her face. "Why did you do that?" It was the same question everyone asked, but coming from a 10-year-old who had lost his parents and was still figuring out how the world worked, it carried extra weight. Maria chose her words carefully.
"Because it wasn't mine,"
she said simply. "And because I have a daughter who's watching how I live my life. I want her to know that being honest is more important than being comfortable." Cameron nodded as if this made perfect sense to him.
"My dad used to say that too. He said how you act when nobody's watching shows who you really are.
Your dad sounds like he was a smart man.
He was. Mom, too. They always did the right thing, even when it was hard.
Cameron's voice was matter-of-fact, but Maria could hear the grief underneath it.
I bet they'd be proud of you, Maria said gently. Uncle Jonathan and Aunt Rebecca are good to me, Cameron said, glancing at the Pierces. But it's not the same as having real parents.
The honesty of it took Maria's breath away.
Sophia reached across the table and patted Cameron's hand with the unconscious compassion of childhood. My dad left when I was little, she said. It's hard not having a regular family like other kids, but my mom takes really good care of me, and maybe your aunt and uncle will feel more like real parents after you've been with them longer.
Cameron smiled at her, the first completely unguarded expression Maria had seen from him. Maybe they're trying really hard. The evening ended with promises to get together again soon and exchange of phone numbers so Sofia and Cameron could stay in touch. As they walked to their cars, Cameron tugged on Maria's sleeve. "Thank you for being honest about the wallet," he said quietly. "Uncle Jonathan says that's why they remembered how to be good people. I want them to be good people because then maybe they'll love me enough to keep me forever." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She knelt down to Cameron's level, looking into his serious young face. "They already love you enough to keep you forever. I can see it in how they look at you, how they talk about you. You don't have to earn their love by being perfect or by them being perfect. Love isn't something you deserve. It's something you're given."
Cameron hugged her then, a quick, fierce embrace that spoke of a child who had learned not to trust too easily but was willing to risk it anyway.
"I'm glad Sofia has you for a mom," he said.
And, I'm glad you have Jonathan and Rebecca, Maria replied.
Over the following months, the two families developed an unlikely friendship.
Sofia and Cameron became close, bonding over shared experiences of non-traditional family structures and a love of science fiction movies.
Maria found herself genuinely enjoying the Pierces' company, their curiosity about her life balanced by their willingness to share their own struggles with parenting a grieving child. The relationship evolved slowly, built on shared meals and playground visits and long conversations about everything from parenting philosophy to favorite books. Maria learned that Jonathan's business success had come at the cost of personal relationships, that he'd lost touch with most of his old friends and had few interests outside of work. Rebecca had given up her career as a teacher when they'd started trying to have children and had struggled to find purpose in the years of failed treatments and dashed hopes. Cameron had changed their lives in ways they were still discovering, forcing them to think beyond themselves and their business interests. But they were learning to be parents through trial and error, without the benefit of the gradual adjustment that comes with raising a child from birth.
Sometimes I feel like we're all just making it up as we go along, Rebecca confided to Maria one afternoon while the children played in Sofia's backyard. I read parenting books, but none of them cover how to help a child process that level of grief while also adjusting to a completely new family.
Most of parenting is making it up as you go along, Maria assured her. The fact that you're worried about doing it right probably means you're doing better than you think. How do you make it look so easy? Rebecca asked.
Sofia is such a confident, happy kid, and you always seem to know exactly what to say to her.
Maria laughed.
I definitely don't always know what to say.
I've made plenty of mistakes. And I'll make plenty more. But I think the key is just being present with her, really listening to what she's telling me, and remembering that my job is to help her become who she's meant to be, not who I think she should be. These conversations became a regular part of their friendship, two mothers sharing the joys and challenges of raising children, offering each other support and perspective. Maria found that she enjoyed having another adult to talk to about parenting, someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the constant worry that came with loving a child. 6 months after their first meeting, Jonathan called Maria with news. "The adoption went through," he said, his voice thick with emotion.
"Cameron is officially our son as of this morning. That's wonderful,"
Maria said, genuinely happy for all of them. "How's he taking it?" "He cried," Jonathan said.
"Happy tears, I think, but it was overwhelming for him. He asked if we could call you and Sofia, if you could come celebrate with us."
They had dinner that night at the Pierce's house, a sprawling place in the hills with a view of the city lights. Maria had been nervous about visiting their home, worried that the wealth gap between their families would be too obvious to ignore. But the house, while large and well-appointed, felt like a home rather than a showplace. Cameron had clearly made his mark on it, with his artwork on the refrigerator and his books scattered across the coffee table. Cameron was different that night, more relaxed and open than Maria had ever seen him. The legal adoption seemed to have lifted a weight he'd been carrying, the fear that this placement might not be permanent after all. "What does this... What does this..." Sofia asked him during dinner, with the direct curiosity of childhood. "It means they're really my parents now," Cameron explained. "If something happened to them, I wouldn't have to go live with strangers again. And if they decided they didn't want me anymore, they couldn't just send me back. Why would they not want you anymore?" Sofia asked, confused. Cameron shrugged. "Sometimes people change their minds about kids, but now they can't because I'm really their son." The matter-of-fact way he discussed this possibility broke Maria's heart. She couldn't imagine the insecurity that came with losing your parents, and then living with the fear that your new family might abandon you too. After dinner, as the children played video games in the living room, Maria found herself in the kitchen with Jonathan and Rebecca, helping with dishes and talking about the adoption process.
"The social worker said our character references were particularly strong," Rebecca mentioned. "Apparently someone wrote us a letter that made a real impression."
Maria looked confused. "I didn't write you a character reference." Jonathan smiled.
"Not directly, but when they interviewed you as part of the background check, when they asked about your experience with our family, what you said carried a lot of weight. They interviewed me?"
Maria was surprised. "When?" "A few months ago. A woman called and said she was doing a routine check on our adoption application, asked if you knew us and what your impression was of our parenting skills." Maria remembered the call now, had assumed it was a standard reference check, and hadn't thought much about it. "I just told the truth, that you are good people who clearly loved Cameron and were trying hard to give him what he needed."
"You also told her about Cameron's reaction to meeting you, about how he'd worried that we might not love him enough to keep him permanently," Rebecca added.
"She said it was clear from talking to you that we'd made progress in helping him feel secure, and that our family had genuine connections to our community." "Your community?" Maria asked. "She meant you," Jonathan said simply. "She said families that isolated themselves, that didn't have meaningful relationships outside their immediate circle, were higher risk for having problems. The fact that we'd developed a friendship with someone from a different background, someone who had no obligation to like us but chose to anyway, suggested that we were capable of the kind of openness and growth that Cameron would need." Maria was quiet for a moment, processing this information.
She'd had no idea that her opinion of the Pierce's parenting would carry weight in the adoption process, but she was glad it had helped.
"I meant what I said," she told them.
"You're good parents. Cameron is lucky to have you."
"We're all lucky," Rebecca said. "This whole experience, meeting you, watching Cameron grow more confident, learning to be a family, it's changed us in ways we didn't expect." As the evening wound down and Maria prepared to take Sofia home, Cameron approached her with a serious expression.
"Maria," he said formally, I wanted to thank you for helping my parents remember how to be good people. The social worker said that's one of the reasons I get to stay with them forever.
You get to stay with them forever because they love you, Maria corrected gently. They didn't need me to teach them how to be good people. They just needed to remember that they already were. But returning the wallet helped them remember? Maybe, but I think having you in their lives did more to change them than anything I could have done. Cameron considered this.
Sofia said that families aren't just people who are related to each other, that people who choose to love each other every day. Is that true? Maria glanced at Sofia, proud of her daughter's wisdom.
I think that's exactly right. Then you and Sofia are part of my family too, Cameron said with the certainty of childhood logic. Because we choose to love each other. The simple statement brought tears to Maria's eyes.
She hugged the boy who had started as a stranger and become something like a nephew, thinking about the unexpected ways that lives could intersect and change each other. Driving home that night, Sofia was unusually quiet in the back seat.
Finally, she spoke up. Mom, do you think finding that wallet was like fate or something? What do you mean, baby? Like, maybe you were supposed to find it so that Cameron could have a real family, and so we could have more family too, and so you didn't have to worry about money anymore? Maria considered this.
She'd never been one to believe strongly in fate or destiny, had always thought that life was more random than planned.
But the chain of events that had started with a lost wallet and led to mortgage payments and friendships and an adopted child seemed too interconnected to be purely coincidental.
Maybe,
she said finally. Or maybe good things happen when people choose to do right, even when it's hard. Maybe kindness creates opportunities for more kindness. I like that better than fate, Sofia said. Because it means we have some control over whether good things happen. That's very wise, Sofia. I learned it from watching you, Mom.
As they pulled into their driveway, their house looking cozy and welcoming in the porch light, Maria reflected on the year that had passed since she'd found Jonathan Pierce's wallet.
The house was truly theirs now, the mortgage papers filed away as a reminder of security rather than worry. She'd started taking business classes at the community college, working toward the catering business that no longer seemed like an impossible dream. Sofia was thriving in school, confident and happy, looking forward to summer camp and sleepovers with friends. But more than the financial security, more than the new opportunities, Maria treasured the relationships that had grown from that moment of choosing honesty over convenience. The Pierces had become genuine friends, people she could call when Sofia was sick or when she wanted to share good news.
Cameron had become the big brother Sofia had never had, protective and kind and full of the resilience that comes from surviving loss.
6 months later, Maria received an invitation to Cameron's 11th birthday party, a backyard barbecue at the Pierce house with kids from his school and neighbors from their street. She and Sofia arrived to find the yard decorated with superhero themes, Cameron's current obsession having evolved from comic books to actual heroes.
Did you know,
Cameron told Sofia as they ran toward the bounce house, that Maria is still my favorite superhero? Because she has the power of being honest even when it's hard. Sofia giggled.
That's not a superpower. That's just being a good person.
Same thing, Cameron called back as they launched themselves into the inflatable castle. Maria found herself standing with Jonathan and Rebecca, watching their children play with a group of kids who seemed to accept Cameron completely, who had no idea of the journey he'd taken to get to this moment of Krell. Ordinary childhood joy.
He's doing well,
Maria observed.
He is,
Rebecca agreed.
Still has tough days, still misses his parents, but he's learned to trust that we're not going anywhere. The therapy helped, but I think mostly it was just time and consistency.
And knowing that he had people rooting for him, Jonathan added, glancing at Maria.
You and Sofia were part of that consistency. He knew that even if something happened to us, he wouldn't be completely alone in the world. Nothing's going to happen to you,
Maria said with the fierce protectiveness that had developed toward this family that had become part of her life.
No, probably not. But knowing he has multiple adults who care about him, that gives him security we couldn't provide just by ourselves.
As the party continued around them, Maria thought about the unpredictable nature of family, the way people could become essential to each other's lives through circumstances none of them could have planned. She'd gone to work one ordinary evening and found a wallet, made a simple decision to return it, and somehow that choice had led to this moment. Surrounded by laughter and friendship and the knowledge that doing right sometimes did pay off in ways beyond imagining. But more than that, it had reminded her that integrity wasn't just about individual character. It was about the connections between people, the trust that made community possible. When she'd returned that wallet, she'd made a statement about the kind of world she wanted to live in, the kind of world she wanted Sofia to inherit. And now, watching Sofia and Cameron plan some elaborate game that involved the other children and seemed to require a great deal of whispering and giggling, Maria realized that she'd gotten exactly that world. Not perfect, not without challenges, but one where kindness was rewarded, and honesty created possibilities and families could form in the most unexpected ways. Later that evening, as they were cleaning up after the party, Cameron approached Maria with a handmade card. Inside, in his careful 10-year-old handwriting, he'd written, "Thank you for teaching my parents how to be superheroes too. Love, Cameron Pierce, really and truly their son." Maria hugged the card to her chest, thinking about the year that had passed since she'd made the choice to do the right thing despite the cost. She gained so much more than financial security. She gained a family and friends and the knowledge that integrity, while sometimes difficult, was always worth the price. As they drove home through streets that had become familiar and comfortable, Sofia fell asleep in the back seat, tired from a day of celebration and play. Maria glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, at the peace on her sleeping face, and felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with the choices she'd made and the life they built together. The wallet had been returned, the mortgage was paid, the adoption was final, and two families who might never have met had become essential parts of each other's stories. It was, Maria thought, a pretty good return on the investment of simple honesty. And if that wasn't a happy ending, it was at least a happy continuation, which was perhaps even better. Because life wasn't about endings. It was about the choices people made every day, the small acts of integrity that built into something larger than themselves. Maria had chosen to return a wallet, and in doing so, she'd helped create a world where kindness mattered and good things could happen to good people. As she tucked Sofia into bed that night, her daughter asked sleepily, "Mom, do you think we'll always be friends with Cameron and his parents?" "I hope so, baby. I think we will. Good. I like having a big family." "Me too, Sofia. Me too." And in the quiet of their paid-off house, surrounded by the security and love that had grown from a single moment of choosing right over easy, Maria Santos fell asleep knowing that sometimes the best rewards come not from what we take, but from what we choose to give back.